Hello everyone, Kurt Hofer here, and welcome back to another episode from Hofer Labs. Today we're going to be continuing on our exploration of Fiore's dagger positions and guards and actions, and we are today moving into, I'm happy to say, the second master dagger section. Before we kick into this, I want to read what's happening here because I'm going to be talking about that in the video in regards to some of the situations that happen with this right here, and I think it's a very important thing for us to kind of open up with, okay? So, Fiore states in regards to the second master, this right here we're talking about a crossed arm covering mechanism. I play with my arms crossed so that I can perform the remedies we have just seen. If we were both in armor, we would not dream of a better parry. There is no crowned remedy stronger than me since I can play mandrito and revezzo and cross below and above. So, that is what Fiore tells us about this position right here. And today we're going to kind of look at some of the observations that I see with this and what maybe some things we glean with this. So with that being the case here, let's kick into it. Okay, so this week we're going to be focusing on the second master. And like I was talking about before, the description of second master kind of holds some key facets to it that really make it kind of tied back to first master, but also at the same time too, it also serves as like a swing gate thing that goes back and forth. So just to recap on that again, it's very strong. Fiore says that there's no stronger parry that is out there utilized from second master. On top of that, it can play both mandrito and revezzo, and it's good for armor. The other part too that I think is also very important here is, again, the very first line here is that from second master, I can play the same things I did. I can do the same plays I just demonstrated. So a little bit about what this is. So first and foremost, second master is the usage of right over left, the positioning of having it so that I'm in this cross arm position right here, right? So I can put this down, I can put this up, I can push this out in any direction here, but ultimately I make a shape that allows me to work any type of covering mechanism that comes against me. Second master is shorter, so again, the same thing we talked about before with the segno. If this is the longest I am with posta longa, this is the longest I am with posta frontale. But again, you can see how immediately right here, by crossing it, I can become shorter. So is that possibly a part of the reason why he would not advise us against armor? Possibly. I will also share too that when we are in armor like this right here, that makes a lot more sense. You can get into certain places, but it also sets you up for certain grapples that you may not necessarily want to be in if you're not in armor. So a couple things right there. The first covering mechanism that we see of second master. So again, we have the segno right here, and Connor's going to come in with that strike, and it comes in like this right here. So we have this, and the image shows, as we can see here, the guy has his arms out in front. Kind of making this shape right here, whether it's up and down, don't really know. I know there's people that will talk about coming here, coming here, coming here. Ultimately, again, when a fight comes out, the point is get this thing up here as fast as possible. Okay, if you have the time to be able to go offline and do certain things, by all means. If you have the mental space to do that, doesn't matter. Ultimately, the point is getting this thing up here in some form or fashion, which allows for this to be covered against within this shot. Now, off of the first cover, all we see off of this right here is that essentially it's in this covering place right here. From this, we have plays that we can go off. But before we go into all of that right here, I'm going to be talking a lot about how we utilize this right here to be able to, as we talked about before, play off of the mandrito or the revezzo. So we're talking about this kind of blow, this kind of blow. But at the same time too, are we really talking about this? I don't know, but we're going to talk about that. So ultimately, what we're doing right here is effectively how I see a lot of this working right here. We're talking about playing on either side of this. I also think that second master is not just, I'm going to come here with it. I think it's also a transitional piece with it all, similar to what we talked about before when we have like the wrist grabbing that we saw within first master covers. So variants of what we see on paper, this is what I see. Shot comes in, I go to meet it. So whether I'm right here or I'm here, it doesn't matter. I don't care ultimately, because if I'm either way, it starts to work as we see fit. So if I get up underneath it and I move into his distressed side, from here, I can retain right off of into first master, and now I've got all the plays we just went through with this. I can work in here from Legadura. I can push up right here and take the dagger away. There's all things that we can have here off of that. By shooting in with cover, he comes up with this one more time. I'm coming off with this. This is no different than me moving across body-wise right here. So when he says off of the mandrito and the revezzo, here's his mandrito side, and I'm contending with it. Now what happens if I catch this late? He comes in with a strike, and I'm here, and he's pushing through with me on it. Well, now I'm starting to turn into, if he was to throw a revezzo shot, going to throw a revezzo shot, this kind of situation where it's crossed. I'm late, he's pushing in, so he's not pushing across, he's like pushing towards my chest. By turning, I get myself to the offline position right here, which gives me access, which we'll talk about later on, into third master place. Again, this could be a continuation, it could be an instance in time. Ultimately right here, there is no concentrate. This is a cover that transitions from from the mandrito to the revezzo. Okay? So he comes in with this right here. I can push into this right here. I've got all sorts of plays. Because I am left over right, which is why I think there's a part that's particular about this, because I'm left over right, as soon as I make this cover, I have access to grabbing, and then I can work off of this and play as I need to be off of this. The other thing too about this, we talked about before with first master covers. He comes into a shot, I come right here, he's strong. Instead of grabbing my arm like this, I shoot up right here into second master play, and now I can actually gain access in other directions of this. So it could also be a transitional piece to move into. Remember, this is not a one and done fight situation. No one just does this and then walks away like the job is done. I'm sorry, that's not how it works. So person coming in with this right here again, first master, I strike him, I push into second master, and then I turn over here. So we're starting to see how we can play. That went from the mandrito to the revezzo. And in that space right there, ultimately it's control. Now, let's talk about the armor piece. Big thing about armor is, depending on what period you're looking at right here, it may be different as far as what your focus is. For Fiore, the gauntlets of the time, the armor harness of the time, they all have different kind of things here, more fans and pieces on them. Again, this is kind of things that all happen and evolve throughout history when it comes down to armament. But one of the big things that happens in armor is you start getting those big old bell cover mechanisms, the hourglasses, that go right off of the gauntlets. So a consideration, and this is not mine, one of my lead instructors, Aaron Brandt, who was out there for Sword Caliber episode 1, he came up with the idea that maybe this is not just because it's good for me being in armor, but ultimately when I'm in armor, if he comes and takes this shot, we can all argue, yes, my helmet works this right here, but at the same time too, this is also relatively close to an area where someone may be striking. What if I'm wearing a bassinet that's open face? What if I'm wearing armor, but I don't necessarily have, maybe I have a koi fan? I don't know. All these things are different factors to consider with it all. The thing that I consider with this right here, especially when it comes to armor, is how this right here becomes a bell, and that by shooting down with this, as he comes down with this shot, I can come here, and just by pushing up into this right here, I create space because of the hourglass shape of the gauntlet. It also allows me all sorts of things right here, where again, I'm touching the back of his hand here, but if this is a gauntlet, this is locking out his wrist. I can put him in all sorts of nasty things right here. If he decides to stay strong this way, again, my left hand's right here, the bell's right here. It allows me to access to be able to push and use the gauntlet to my advantage. And again, eventually what I want to do with all this, and that's going to be a long time from now, I want to walk through the dagger plays and see how they might apply. A little bit different with armor. But right now, we're just looking at the manuscript. So that's a big introduction to Second Master. Now we're going to talk about here the basics of countering it. So countering Second Master Dagger. We talked a little bit right here already in the first first master plays. It's very similar to what happens if someone braces up here on the arm and reinforces against the block. Remember that good strong right here, that tutta, porta, ferro doubled, which I can't use with the dagger in my hand. So in this case right here, we're going to be looking at both sides of this. I take that shot, I come in with this right here, and again, looking at this, he stepped off in the line here, there's a way of creating this. The big part about this is if he turns and rotates me down, and I'm going into this right here, well, one of the big things right here is that we talk about, this is why we're gonna be looking later on, this goes into third master counters where we're starting to reach over the top in certain areas. For today, we're not going whereas he's one over and he's pushing me into third master. We're going to look at right here, the very, very beginning portion here, which gives entryway into first master. And from first master, remember, ultimately he makes second master cover. And from this cover right here, he can cover this right here and just push over. And now he's got every play available here. If he gets to this right here, then it turns into, I just go back into first master covers, counters. But for the second master position here, if he's got me dead to rights right here, the counter is very simple. Take this and push the elbow. Now there's a couple things about this. Whether it's a cross, whether it's up, whether it's down, ultimately the countering mechanism here is by being able to push this over here to be able to clear and get him over into the direction because he's pushing off this line, okay? Whether I have this in a position where it's up, which works very, 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 very well because it's pushing into his body, or across and down over his arms because that way it's already covered this way. I'm using the top loop. Or it's just a straight crack and then to move in, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, because my right side is being tied up, my mandrito side is being tied up and pushed back, boom, because it's going backwards this way, I'm just going to rotate with it, which gives me access and clearance. Real fast here, we've talked about as far as counters before, understand that essentially, even though this right here is very effective and very small right here, does not mean that this person is not going to recover from that. Fights, when it comes down to hand, are very visceral. They're very fast. As soon as someone makes contact right here, something else happens with it. It becomes very, very fast and entangled. So understand when we look at this for second master dagger, okay, what the big takeaways are. He comes in from this. He can make first master covers. He can also, as I come across here, I'm working now into my revezzo side. Revezzo side to me does not necessarily mean that I'm coming this way across with this. Of course he can cover this way. But we're going to talk about this. Now one thing that he's doing right here is he's using posta frontale to cover the arm, right? If we're using second master, right over left, once again, we get this position here. And again, everything else, he traces down the wrist, and I'm right there down into the lower lock area. Second master is a way of being, it's a placeholder. So, again, offline, he goes into first. I push across, he pulls down right here. Countering this, I come up across here, and I push over, which allows me to stick. That is the introduction to second master dagger.
So you can see with the video that, you know, a big thing about this position here, about the second master cover, is that already he is telling us that we can utilize this position in a form or fashion that allows us to cover above, below, left and right, regardless of where we are at against an opponent. And that essentially when you come to armor, that this is something that may be better utilized in armor, or whatever that means right there. So, and like I said before, talking about how we cover enclosed because of armor considerations. Regardless of that, this position is very much so a continuation, and I feel like it's a gate. So in the Fiore curriculum that I run right now, one of the big things we call it Dagger Wing Chun, and that's because I don't have a better term for it right now. But essentially we play off of this, we cover, and then we roll and move, and we shift, and we find all the different kind of covering mechanisms that are available off of one cover, into another cover, into another cover, and we just shift and roll and move. A big part about, a theory that I have when it comes down to historical martial arts is, especially when they talk about Lichtenauer's concepts when he says, that wrestling is the foundation of the art. And again, I've said before how Fiore, in two of the four of his manuscripts, has Abrazari in the lead point of the discussion. By practicing rolling and moving on people, you learn a lot more about how to shift into positions quite readily and effective. And on top of that, there's less about like I'm trying to go bink and bink. It becomes much more of a movement in which rolls and shifts quite effectively in ways of being able to cover different angles. The second master cover is, like I said before, there's a lot to it in itself. And the second master cover is a big part about, being able to utilize this so that we can shift to our left and our right areas right here. And when we start looking at things like with armor, like I said, with bell gauntlets and everything else, where you have like this hourglass shape where it comes like this, you can push and turn and hook very effectively in such ways that are that really can lock someone out of being able to do anything in the space of training. So anyway, like I said before, this is just, again, we wanted to start off this with the second master, get ourselves familiar with what this is, and start talking about what we can maybe be able to glean from this in the direction of being able to cover a certain position, to go to another position. How does this become first master dagger? How does this become third master dagger? How am I going to utilize this for later on when it comes down to like eighth and ninth dagger? And in general, how is this position viable for multiple situations? Not just, one posta position is not necessarily just saying, yep, this is only it for this one situation right here. But we may find ourselves in this plays in accordance to the fight itself. So anyway, this was my thoughts in regards to this right here. I'm excited to get into second master dagger. It's not a very long section, and it doesn't take much to get into because it's basically two plays. And I think that's done that way because you're now talking about transitioning from the very first portion of it all, and then you're rolling into the other side. And we're going to be paying some time here with that over the next couple of weeks in regards to how second master becomes into third master, and then playing back and forth how we may continue this first to second to third, or third to first to second, in many different forms and fashion. If you're one of my viewers and subscribers, thank you so much as always for tuning in here. Your comments, your observations, and your support is really appreciated, and it helps me want to do more when it comes to this practice. If you are new to this channel, consider liking, subscribing, and sharing with a friend out there. Maybe there's someone out there that wants to potentially look at learning into the historical martial arts in the case of Ahmed Sari or Fiore's works or other things that are out there. And maybe this is something to help out. If you are a practitioner already in these cases, tell me what you're thinking out there. What are you seeing in these spaces? What are you playing with here? What is this done for you? I'm very interested to hear what people have to say out there, as always. So, but until the next time, as always, stay safe out there, train well, and fight on. I will see you all soon.